العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين إن الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين ربنا إننا آمنا فاغفر لنا ذنوبنا وقنا عذاب النار الصابرين والصادقين والقانتين والمنفقين والمستغفرين بالإسخار شهد الله أنه لا إله وملائكته وأولو العلم قائما بالقسط لا إله إلا هو العزيز الحكيم ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.
Thank you very much, Imam Jallo. Bishop, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Lord God of power and might, we thank you for your goodness, your mercy, and your grace, and your love, and your forgiving power to all your creation throughout the whole world. We thank you for seeing us through the past week and for bringing us to the beginning of another new week. We continue as we sit at the TRRC to give ourselves unreservedly under your direction, your protection, your providence, your security, and your defense, and that you will grant that as we seek the truth, that they will come forth, and that there will be healing, there will be reconciliation, there will be reparation, and your justice will descend mightily upon this land. This we ask through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, Bishop. Council, are we ready to continue from last Thursday? If we are, you have the floor, please. Proceed.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Good morning to you all. The plan for today is to proceed with the witness of last week, and thereafter we hope to have two more witnesses, all of whom would talk about the muscling of the media during the 22 years of Gambia. Over to you, Sagar Thomas, for a continuation of the testimony of this witness.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Commissioners. Good morning, members of the audience. We are ready to proceed with completion of the testimony of the witness from Thursday. Mr. Usher, can you kindly bring in the witness?
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Witness.
Good morning.
I hope you had a good weekend.
Yes, indeed I
Are you ready to complete your testimony today?
am.
May I remind you that you are still under oath and you're still under a duty to tell the truth to the commissioners. Before we proceed with the rest of your testimony today, I will give you a brief recap of your testimony on Thursday afternoon and an overview of the remaining areas you are expected to cover today.
All right.
On Thursday, you started by telling us about your biographical information, and as a young journalist with the Daily Observer newspaper, you took us through the beginning of your career and shared with us some of your challenging experiences on the job, the political interferences at the Daily Observer newspaper at the time, incidents of intimidation and harassment, the death of Deida Haidara, and the procession protesting against his killing organized by the GPU soon thereafter, the consequences of that protest, which led to the suspension of Ndaita Fasose, the then editor-in-chief of the paper, and your ultimate resignation, not only from the paper, but your career as a full-time active journalist, because you felt you could not practice your profession properly and independently. You also gave evidence on how you joined the RVTH soon thereafter as a communications officer, and ultimately, the ghost of your past haunted you there, leading ultimately to your unlawful arrest, detention, and torture at the hands of the NIA and the military as a result of the Freedom newspaper saga. You testified about the panel of investigators who interrogated you about your involvement with Freedom newspaper and accused you of being an informant and the prime suspect in respect of an article about the ex-president Jammeh's late mother, Assambi Bojang. You told us after that that even after the panel exonerated you and recommended your release, Musa Jammeh, who was not part of the panel, walked into the room and recommended that you were the main suspect and, walked into the room and commanded them to detain you because he had prematurely informed Jammeh that you were the main suspect and could not go back to him with a different story. Before you ended your testimony, you started testifying about your encounter with the same Musa Jammeh and Ismaila Jammeh, who were leading a group of soldiers called the Junglers, who were the personal torturers and hit squad of the ex-president Jammeh. During today's testimony, we will focus on the details of your night of terror with the Junglers, what happened after your torture, your unlawful dismissal from RVTH after you were tortured, and how you spent your remaining days in detention at the NIA, even though you had no reason to be there in the first place. Your eyewitness account of others who were detained and tortured at the NIA during your time there, your eventual release, and the impact of all this on your life. The commissioners will also have an opportunity to question you after you finish your testimony, and you will also have an opportunity to give any last words you would have for the Gambian public. Is that understood?
Yes.
Are you ready to proceed with your testimony?
I am ready to proceed.
Very well. It is correct. It is correct that after you refused to change your statement and confess to being the Freedom informant to reflect what Musa Jammeh told ex-president Jammeh, he promised to give you the VIP treatment. Is that correct?
Very well.
What did you understand by the VIP treatment?
Well, at that point, I know very well that it was not going to be something nice, because since I refused to accept what he wanted at the time, I know the VIP treatment will not be something nice, but I don't know exactly what it was going to be.
Kindly draw the mic closer to you so that we can hear you properly. Do you know what the VIP treatment entailed?
Yes, I later knew what it entails, but when he just informed me at the conference room, definitely I don't know, but I know for certain it's going to be something harsh.
And you will later tell us what that VIP treatment entailed, of course.
Yes, when he promised that he was going to give me a VIP treatment if I don't change my statement, and I still maintain that I'm not going to change the statement, because what they are accusing me of, I don't know anything about it. So he asked the other officer, that's Ismaila, to escort me downstairs for a VIP treatment. I followed them, that's Musa Jammeh, Ismaila. We left Tumbul behind. So while we were going down to their torture chamber, the other junglers that we left standing on the corridor followed us. All of them followed us behind the counter-terrorism unit of the NIA. When we got there, Musa asked me to sit on the ground, and I complied immediately. It's a ring shape, circular, and molded with bricks. So I was asked to sit there, and then he asked me to remove the suit I was wearing. I was wearing a suit that day, so he asked me to remove the suit, that's the coat, and I was left with the inner shirt. So Again, he repeated that same question in the conference room, whether I'm ready to change the statement, that he was giving me the last chance to comply with him, but I still said no. Go ahead and kill me or torture me, but I'm not going to change my statement.
You mentioned that you were led downstairs by Musa Jame, and you mentioned an Ismaila. Who is Ismaila?
Ismaila Jame is also accused of being part of the junglers. Currently, he's detained at Yundum Barracks, at the military police at Yundum Barracks, with other junglers as well.
My apologies. You also mentioned that the corridor leading downstairs to the counter-terrorism unit was lined up with soldiers. Do you know who these soldiers were?
I can't remember those other soldiers. The only three people I can remember are those I've mentioned. That's Musa Jame, Tumbul Tamba, and Ismaila Jame. The rest, I can't recall their names now, or even their faces.
Were these the soldiers who followed you to the torture chamber, which you described?
Yes, all of them followed.
And this torture chamber was located downstairs behind the counter-terrorism unit?
Yes. Behind, it's just a space sort of, not just a space sort of without, it's not concrete, like I mean at the back of the CTU. So where I sat, you have blocks, like it's a circular part, molded with cement blocks. So I was asked to sit on the ground, so I complied.
Sorry, Mr. Mboob, continue.
Yes, after sitting on the ground, then Musa said he's going to give me another opportunity to change my statement. And I still maintain that I was not going to do it. Let him kill me or torture me or release me, but I'm not going to change my statement. And I maintain that statement I wrote in the morning.
And these soldiers that followed you downstairs to the torture chamber, where were they positioned whilst Musa Jame was giving you a final opportunity to answer the question he asked you?
Whilst I was on the ground and Musa was talking, they all formed that circular shape, all the others. But before then, I saw them. You know, you have flowery trees going towards that place. And in fact, inside that torture chamber, you have flowers also, flowery trees. So while we were going, some of them were cutting branches of those trees, waiting for the next command.
You already mentioned that you did not recognize any of the soldiers, but do you know if they belong to any particular group, these soldiers?
You know, the junglers are all from the state guards. All of them are from the state guards.
You were saying that these soldiers were part of the junglers?
Yes, all of them.
And these junglers were being led by Tumbul Tamba?
Tumbul Tamba at the time. He was the head of the junglers at that time, in 2006.
Okay. But you mentioned that Tumbul Tamba did not come down with you.
Yes, when we were going, he did not. So when they started beating me, whether he joined them, I can't remember. But we left him upstairs when we were going downstairs.
As far as you know, who was commanding the junglers when you were being tortured?
Musa Jame, Captain Musa Jame.
Kindly tell us what happened next.
So he kept repeating this question, and when he got fed up, he said, okay, since you don't want to change your statement, one, we will bury you alive. Two, we will fire you. But before talking about the burial aspect, he then asked one of the guys who was holding the AK-47 to cock his gun and fire me. Then I was on the ground. That moment I thought, yes, I'll be the next day the Hydra. I'll be shot. Then this guy cocked the gun, but did not fire, pulled the trigger. He just cocked the gun, and Musa asked him to stop. Malick, are you ready to change your statement? I said, no. Go ahead and do whatever you want to do, but I'm not going to change my statement. Immediately, he said, okay, then let's bury him alive. I saw the guy with the spade, but they did not dig anything. Let's bury him alive. Start beating. Beat him. That's how they all started beating me. Some with those branches of trees, others started kicking. I was beaten for some time. I wish you can, that night, if you see me, you can even recall this, Malick, because I was bleeding all over.
Can you tell us who beat you?
All of them standing, except Musa and Ismaila. All of them except Musa and Ismaila.
Musa Jame and
Ismaila Jame.
Ismaila Jame did not beat you?
No, at that time. But Musa commanded them to beat me. So,
and what was Ismaila Jame doing?
Ismaila was just standing, doing nothing. He did not beat me, he was just standing, doing nothing. So this beating took some time. I can say 30 minutes. I was crying. At some point, in fact, I couldn't cry. So I just bear the pain and did whatever they were doing. All of a sudden, Musa received a call that night. This was between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. And he stepped aside, out of that place. And Ismaila whispered to me. I think Ismaila was the second in command because we left Tumbul upstairs. So Ismaila whispered to me that that call came from the State House. Whether it was the president, I don't know, but the call came from the State House to find out what we are doing here. So Ismaila told me, we were asked to torture you, but not to kill you. But the way things are going, they may kill you. So because he told others to stop beating. And he told me that, okay, what are you going to do? Immediately Musa returns. If they are beating you, just pretend as if you are dead so that they can leave you. So when Musa returned after that phone call, so he asked them why they stopped beating me. But they did not say anything, and he asked them to continue beating. He started beating me again. So the next moment I said, okay, let me seek to heed to Ismail's advice. Whilst they were beating me, I just pretended as if I'm dead. No movement. So the next minute, Musa announced to those people beating me that if you kill him, I will arrest all of you. Because one, I didn't even ask you people to beat him. Immediately he changed his statement that he didn't ask them to beat me. So if they kill me, he will arrest all of them that night. So immediately he announced that this same Ismail who whispered to me carried me from the ground. Then Musa was following. You can see that he was afraid whether I was dead or not. So Ismail carried me back. As he was going back to the cell, Musa was following, trying to find out if I'm breathing or not. It seems he was panicked at the time. Then Ismail told him to go back. It's okay, he will take charge. So that's how Ismail carried me to the cell, and they locked the cell again. So immediately, after a few minutes, all of them started leaving the NIA headquarters. But Musa was really particular whether I was leaving or not.
Let's just go back to your torture sessions. You mentioned that they were beating you. What were they beating you with?
Sticks, military boots. Some were using their physical fist. Yes.
And can you also tell us who was doing the beating?
All of them except Musa and Ismail at the time. But I can't recall their names. But all of them were beating me.
You mentioned that in the middle of the torture session, Musa Jammeh got a phone call from State House.
That's what Ismail said, yes, from State House.
And you mentioned that the call was to find out what was happening with you.
Yes, with me.
You also mentioned that Ismaila Jammeh gave you some words of advice to play dead. Mm-hmm. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And you're saying that he basically saved your life?
That night.
Can you kindly tell us what happened after you were taken back to the cells?
Ismaila carried me back to the cell with the NIA security guard because they are the one responsible for the keys. So this particular guard, that's the barrister who took me, who asked for me when they came for me initially. So they opened the door, and I was taken back to the cells. So when I got inside, then my co-detainees, they were so scared because they didn't know what was happening to me out there. So when I returned, they saw blood all over my body. So they were really scared. For them, they are thinking that, okay, it's going to be one after the other. So they will call another person next. But luckily for them, none of those people I was with in the same cell were called. They called the next person in the other cell. That's Babukar Sanyang, commonly known as Tar. Tar Sanyang is a businessman engaged in printing business at Serekunda. This guy was doing well in those days. Then these were the major printers in town. So he was also arrested in connection to the Freedom Newspaper saga. So Babukar was called upon from the other cell, and he was also tortured. Because you can see the condition I was with, you can see Babukar in the same condition the next morning when we saw each other.
You mentioned your condition. You said you were bleeding. Can you tell us what caused the bleeding and what injuries you had on your body?
Up until today, 13 years after the incident, if I remove my clothes, you will see lacerations all over my body. Apart from my face, from my ears, everything down. And up till now, if I remove the clothes, you will see the torture marks are still there, visible.
After you were taken to your cells, you said the other detainees were there. Can you just remind us who these detainees were?
Pamodu Fall of GRTS at the time, anchoring sports news. Then you have Wuraba. Wuraba was operating an internet cafe along Westfield, around the Westfield area. Then you also have Musa Sharif, the proprietor of Voice newspaper. Then he was working with the Point newspaper. You also have Lamin Bojang from MRC, Harry Juf, Cherno Kamara from Gamtel in our cell. Then the other cell, you have the Babukar Sanyang, that's star. Then you also have Yoruba from MRC, Fakeba Sise from MRC, and Lamin Dabo, all of them from MRC in the other cell.
And on that particular night, you mentioned that after your torture session, Babukar Sanyang was also tortured.
Was also tortured that night.
Was he the only one that was tortured?
Yes, that night. We were the only two who were tortured that night.
And what was the condition what was his condition after he was tortured?
Same applies to me. You can see, in fact, Babukar's eye was really reddish in color when he was brought back. The next morning, you can see the eye was reddish in color, and you can see blood stains all over him.
And regarding the condition of your own body, can you make an undertaking to perhaps take a picture and send it to the commission of the state of your body so that we can add it to the record?
The marks that are visible now, I can take a picture and send it.
Thank you very much. Did the detainees do anything about your condition when you came back?
Yes. In fact, what they were asking was exactly my ordeal in the hands of Musa Jame and the junglers. So, but then I can explain anything because I was really tired and I was really suffering at that night. So they just allowed me. For them, they were just discussing what was going to happen next because they don't know whether they will come for them or not. But the chances are that they were thinking that yes, they will come for all of us because we are all accused of the same crime, despite the fact that we are innocent of the crime they accuse of. So they were just discussing while I was resting until the next morning.
And what happened to your wounds? Did you receive any treatment?
Not at that spot, because the next morning, early in the morning as usual, the guards on duty will open the cell door for us to ease ourselves. So that morning, one Abdullah Suare was on duty. So Abdullah came early in the morning to open the door. He is commonly called Suare at the NIA headquarters. Imagine Suare, when Suare saw me in that condition, he was crying, bitterly crying. The bunches of keys he was holding, in fact, it fell. Until my co-detainees advised him, this is not safe because your people, they can come, they can see these things. Just open the door. Though it's painful, but he was not happy with the condition I was. The guy was crying bitterly, seeing me in that condition.
As far as you told us, it was the soldiers,
yes, the soldiers,
the military personnel called the junglers who actually tortured you. Do you know if the NIA were actually aware of the fact that you were being tortured at the NIA premises on that night?
The next morning, this was reported to, the first thing they did, my co-detainees, is to inform SOW. Where we were detained, Samba SOW was the head of that unit. That's the investigation department. They informed SOW. SOW came to the cell and saw my condition. And I believe SOW did the same thing, followed the chain of command, informed Nuru Seka about my condition. Whether Nuru informed the Director General or the Deputy Director General, I'm not sure. But SOW did inform Nuru about my condition. And immediately I asked for a medical, for me to be taken to the hospital. SOW did the same thing because he informed me that he had told Nuru so that they can take me to the hospital. But that was not the case. Whether it was refused from the DG's level or the Deputy DG's level, I don't know. But I was not taken anywhere that day. I was just like that, suffering.
And how many days did you remain in detention after that?
I spent 139 days in detention, but basically over a week in the cell. Then after that, after about 9 or 10 days, we were removed from the cell to the reception area, where we spent the rest of the days. But before they took me to the hospital, it took like 9 days because I insisted that they must take me to the hospital. At the end, they took me to the military clinic, not the main teaching hospital, RVTH, no. I was taken to the military clinic, and all I got at the military clinic was the usual paracetamol.
And where was the military clinic?
Just behind the accident and emergency, next to the accident and emergency unit of RVTH.
Did they treat your wounds there?
They did not.
And looking at the close proximity of the military clinic and RVTH, why do you think you were not taken to RVTH?
Well, they were hiding me from the public because they don't know, because at first they denied having me at the NIA. One, because when my family came visiting for me, they said Malick is not here. It took them about 2 weeks before they know, yes, I was detained at the NIA. So, and being a journalist at the time, they know that journalists will be interested in my case. So to avoid that, they took me to the military clinic, not RVTH.
And the only treatment you got there was painkillers?
And again, when I was going, yes, painkillers. When I was going, because you know, the coat, because they asked me to wear my coat so that those lacerations will not be shown, the torture marks, so that it will cover those things. So I was forced to wear my coat before leaving the NIA premises.
Despite your wounds,
yes.
You were forced to wear that coat?
Coat, yes.
To disguise your appearance?
That's it.
What happened after that? Were you taken back to the NIA?
Yes, after, no, in fact, before they took me to the hospital, something happened. That's the dismissal. Because I was tortured on the 26th. Then on the 29th, I was escorted to RVTH. When I was going, I don't know the reason why I was escorted. They just took me to the RVTH. That's 3 days after my torture. When I got to the RVTH, I met the acting chief medical director, Dr. Malick Mboob. Also present was the PRO at the time, Babu Karngom, and then the administrator, Mrs. Correa. When I got to the hospital at the admin building, I was handed a dismissal letter. 3 days after I was tortured. Basically 4 days when I was arrested. And while I was being dismissed, then the investigation was on. Nothing was concluded. I was not charged. I was not taken to court, but dismissal came while the investigation was on.
So you were taken to the RVTH, not for medical treatment, but actually to inform you that you were being dismissed from the service?
That's it. That's the 29th of May. I was dismissed from the service.
And at that point, when you were taken to the RVTH, because this was just a couple of days after your torture, what was your condition and your appearance like?
Because when I got to the hospital, because this time around it was at the hospital, my colleagues, they were shocked, but they cannot do anything. You know, then you don't even come close to me. You can see them from the distance. Everybody was looking at me. They were shocked that I was going through. In fact, it was that visit that, is it Fourier or another paper wrote about my story, that they saw Malick was spotted at the hospital and he was not in good shape at the time. One of the papers carried that story, that I was spotted at the hospital.
And none of your colleagues asked any questions or raised any alarms?
They cannot do it because I was escorted by security agents from the NIA. So their mission was let him go and receive the dismissal letter and then move back to the NIA.
Do you have a copy of this dismissal letter?
Yes, I have the copies, and I want to also dwell on my dismissal. Because, as I said, it was really funny. During the interrogation process, they didn't even wait for them to conclude their findings and to know my fate. I was reliably informed at the hospital that the directives came from the Office of the President to dismiss me. The Office of the President, I believe they wrote to PMO. PMO wrote to the Minister of Health, which is the line ministry of the hospital, informing them of the same decision. But funny enough, PMO's letter, signed by one J. Belfort, stated that they concurred with the directives to dismiss me. Because I believe the PMO should be an independent body. Investigations were on, so what was the basis of my dismissal? I was dismissed without any basis, and the PMO concurred with the presidency to dismiss me. They wrote to the Permanent Secretary, Minister of Health, to inform them of this directive, and the Minister of Health also wrote to the Chairman, Hospital Management Board, that's RVTH, to terminate my services. And this thing happens effective 29th of May. That's the letter from RVTH. But PMO's letter happened just 2 days after I was arrested. That was the 26th of May, addressed to the Permanent Secretary, Minister of Health, that they concurred with the decision to dismiss me from the services.
Can we have copies of the letters you're referring to, please? Usher, can you kindly get the letters? Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, we would like to put into the record 2 letters dated the 26th of May, 2006, and the 29th of May, 2006, to form part of the record. These are the dismissal letters of Mr. Mboob, and then we would want to refer to them.
Request them are granted. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The exhibit numbers are 0061 and 0062. The letter dated the 26th May 2006 is dated 0061, and the second letter is dated 0062. Thank you very much. Okay. Mr. Chairman, we'll just hand over the letters so that you can have a look at them, and then we would like it back so that I can ask the witness a couple of questions. Thank you.
Counsel, you want to continue, or do you have to have the letters?
Yes, please. I would like the
we all
letters
see it?
because I need to question the witness on them. Thank you.
Yeah, let me take a bit of time. Yeah, Mr. Mboob, just to save some time, I'll just proceed with questioning you about the letters. The letter that you received from PMO, it was copied to different institutions. Can you remember who those letters were copied to?
Yes, the letter was copied to the Secretary General Office of the President, one, the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Health and Social Welfare. It was also copied to the PS, PMO, and I think they are filed. They are running file.
I can understand the letters being copied to PMO and the Ministry of Health, which was the line ministry. Can you tell me why the letter was copied to the Office of the President?
That goes to show that the directives came from the Office of the President. Because as I said, when I got to the hospital to receive my dismissal letter, I was told by one of my colleagues there that the directives came from the OP through PMO, Ministry of Health, then to the hospital, that I should be dismissed. So that's the reason why they were also copied, that they concurred with the decision to dismiss me.
And was it normal that dismissal letters of every civil servant in the country would be copied to the office of the president?
I doubt this. I believe because they have interest in my case, that was the reason why they were copied.
Very well. So you've mentioned that after you were taken to RVTH and you were dismissed, it was subsequently that you went to the military hospital and you were treated. Is that correct? That's the correct chronological order?
Yes, it's correct. After 9 days, yes.
Okay. And after you left the military hospital, did you go back to the NIA?
Yes. After the military hospital, I was escorted back to the NIA, as usual, back to the cell. Yes.
And at that point, can you tell us who the director of the NIA was whilst you were being detained there?
Harry Sambo was the Director General, assisted by Momodu Hydra.
And at any point, did you have any cause to see him or actually communicate with him during your detention?
Yes, all through our detention, we've been trying unsuccessfully to meet with Harry Sambo. In fact, it came at a time Harry stopped using the main gate. Because as I said, we just spent about 9 or 10 days in the cells. Then after that, we were taken back. We were spending the rest of the days at the reception area. So at the reception area, you cannot enter the NIA and we will not see you. So Harry stopped using that gate. He was using the back gate by the seaside to and from his office, just to avoid us.
And why do you think he was avoiding you?
One, we were arrested, detained, tortured, accused of a crime that we are innocent of. And now, because our case was handled by 3 service chiefs, the IGP at the time, the Chief of Defense Staff, and Harry Sambo. So when they realized that we are innocent, all of them distanced themselves. So nobody was willing to take the case file to the president, because the police, the Ministry of Justice advised that we should be released. But no, they refused to hear it, simply because they are afraid to do so. So what they decided doing was to just distance themselves, all the service chiefs.
And can you tell us under what circumstances where the police and Ministry of Justice, under what circumstances did the police and Ministry of Justice advise that you be released?
At the end of the investigation, the file was sent to the prosecution unit of the Gambia Police Force, just for them, to scout their opinion, whether these are chargeable, whether there is any evidence, in fact, in the first place, or is it chargeable or so. The advice remained the same. 1, there is no evidence attached to this. 2, there is not chargeable, so it's better you release them. I'm sure they were not satisfied. They sent the files again to Ministry of Justice for the same legal opinion. And then we learned that the same advice came. Then they just ignore us like that.
And why do you think they did not, accept the recommendations and release you as per the advice? Our
arrest and detention, it was well publicized in those days. And Freedom newspaper and the Jammeh regime, it was a critic of Jammeh, Freedom newspaper. So they thought, okay, we have got them. The people who have been informing Panderimbai, we've got them. You see, the publicity given to the case at the time, and at the end of the day, after the investigation, you can't get an evidence from all of us. So I'm sure they were scared. And after what we've been through, to come back and tell the president, yes, we got the wrong people, I'm sure they were scared of that, of losing their jobs.
So the reason you were not released was because they were afraid to go back to President Jammeh and tell him that you were not the main suspect, as they had informed him.
Correct.
And this was the second time that this was happening. The first time was when the panel exonerated you at the beginning of your interrogation. That's and Musa Jammeh walked in and said you should be detained, because even though you were innocent.
Correct.
Very well. Let's just go back to RVTH. I just want to make something, I just want to establish something. You had said that you were taken there to receive your dismissal letter. Can you tell us whether or not you actually received any medical treatment whilst you were there?
At the RVTH?
Yes, at the
particular
RVTH.
Day. There was no, in fact, that was not the purpose why I was taken there. The reason why I was taken is to go and hand over to the public relations officer and receive my dismissal letter and back. So there was no time for that. In fact, I'm sure they will not allow it because that was not the directive given to those who escorted me. So there was no medical attention given to me at the time.
Okay, very well. We understand the fact that that was not the purpose of your visit there. But any reasonable person would have thought that going into RVTH, which was the main hospital in the Gambia, and seeing your appearance and your condition then, your colleagues at least would have suggested that perhaps you be given medical treatment before you were whisked off to the NIA again.
Yes. As you rightly mentioned, any right-thinking person would have done that. But in this case, that was not the case. I was escorted, received a dismissal letter, and back to the NIA agents.
Did your colleagues make that suggestion? Did Dr. Njai make that suggestion,
for
example?
They did not.
Did you ask them to treat you?
I did not at that point.
Very well. Let's just go back to your detention at the NIA. When you came initially at the NIA, you mentioned the different people that you were detained with. You again mentioned other people you were detained with. Can you just tell us at what point different detainees left and others came in? Because I believe during your detention, different people came in and out because you were detained there for a long period of time. So just go through with us some of the people who were detained, at what point they left, and if anyone came in, who those people were.
Okay, when the whole saga started, I was the first person to be detained. Then that evening, Uraba, Pamodu Fall, Lamin Bojang, Cherno Kamara, Hari Juf, Hadi Dabo, Babukar Sanyang, Fakeba Sise, Yeroba, and Lamin Dabo were brought in that same evening. So after, on the 30th, because this was on the 25th, then on the 30th, 5 days later, Lamin Cham came with Duta Kamaso, and Lamin Cham, he narrated his ordeal here last week. He was also tortured mercilessly by the same gang, Musa Jame and others. Duta Kamaso, then that's in connection to this Freedom newspaper. But while we were there, during these 139 days, I've seen a lot of detainees being brought in and out. Some were detained at the agency. Our case happened 2 months after the March 21st abortive coup of Ndurcham. So during those periods, while we were there, they were bringing these people in and out, maybe either for further interrogation or all whatnot. The likes of Abdullah Kujabi. Abdullah Kujabi was one time the Director General of the NIA. He was brought in there while we were there many times for interrogation. Tamsir Jase was also brought in. Tamsir Jase was one time Director General of the Gambia Immigration Department. Demba Dem, who was one time a National Assembly member, was also brought in during that period. IEC officials, then Abu Dondenjai was the chairman of the Independent Electoral Commission. So Abu Dondenjai with his commissioners were brought in, like Suleiman Said Mboob, who was one time Minister of Agriculture. Mr. Sane, a commissioner. Suleiman too was a commissioner of the IEC after he was dismissed from being a cabinet minister. So they were also brought in, the IEC officials. They spent some days with us. Also brought in is the current Speaker of the National Assembly, Mariam Dentin. I used to spend the same night with Mariam Dentin at the reception area. She was really traumatized at that time. Mariam Dentin was also brought in. She spent some days with us. And one Madi Sise. Madi Sise used to be an APRC supporter, a businessman, was also brought in during that period. One Sunday, a Nigerian school teacher who was brought in because of, examination malpractice, something like that. And another Nigerian, I can't remember the name, he was accused of being a drug smuggler, was also brought in during that period. So these are the names I can remember for now who were brought in at the time.
And from those names, can you tell us if anyone else, apart from Babukar Sanyang, who you earlier mentioned, was tortured?
The first week, while we were at in the cell, we've been hearing a lot of cries at night. But then we were in the cell, we don't know who actually, but they were bringing people from Mile 2. I believe those are the soldiers in the fuel coup. They were bringing them. That week we spent with them. So that week, like almost every night, they will bring in people, torture them back, but we don't know who.
That's the 2006 abortive coup?
Yes, 2006.
Okay. All right, carry on, please.
So these are some of the detainees who were brought in, and some of them they are coming from Mile 2, because Mariam Denton she was detained at Mile 2, then brought in at the NIA, spent some days with us before she was finally released. Yes.
You mentioned that she was traumatized. Can you tell us, what condition she was in?
Almost every night, this lady will just, let's say, if the conference room is just next to the Marina Parade. So if vehicles are passing at night, the lady will suddenly wake up and say, Malick, they are coming. I said, who? The junglers. I said, no, it's just the moving vehicles. So perhaps he was also tortured before.
What about Lamin Cham? Did anything happen to him?
Yes. Lamin Cham, when he came that evening, because the same thing happens to me, when I saw Lamin Fati, who was earlier detained prior to my arrival, I asked Lamin Fati whether, because NIA, everybody talk about torture. I asked Lamin Fati, I hope you are not tortured. Lamin said no, though he was lying, because he doesn't want to just get me scared. So when Lamin Cham also came, I did the same thing. He asked me whether I was tortured. I said no, I was not tortured. So he was escorted home to go for them to search his house. Then the next day, when he was tortured, what he told me was that I wish you informed me prior. The time they escorted me to my house, because they allowed me to have a shower, I would have just killed the fence and left. But you didn't inform me. I said no. If I had done so, you would be scared. Because when I came to Lamin Cham, Fatih did the same thing to me. That he was not tortured, and I was mercilessly tortured, and he also was tortured.
And how do you know he was tortured?
Lamin was dragged from the reception area where I was with Duta Kamaso, Buba Jame, and Lamin Bojang. He was dragged from that room. In fact, they started torturing him, not even behind the CTU, at their parking lot. That's where Lamin Cham, that's where they started kicking him. And he was dragged from that place to the parking lot. Then you can see, immediately they left the room, Lamin started crying. Immediately they left the room. That was then Lamin started crying, because they started beating him immediately right from that point, before he got to that CTU building.
And after his torture, was he brought back to the same detention?
He was brought back to the same condition with me, lacerations all over, blood oozing all over his body.
And what did you do in respect of Lamin Cham?
We consoled him that I've also been through, and it was my co-detainees who were supporting. I was not taken for any medical checkup, so we are consoling him. He did mention here that Duta Kamaso was also doing the motherly thing, trying to help Lamin heal those wounds.
And whilst you were detained, who remained in detention with you, and who was released eventually?
Yes, after about 10 days, we were all called out and then handed a form. By this time around, it was coordinated by the NIA. So we were asked to fill that form. So we all took a copy and a pen. So as we were filling, I saw a question which says, what's your political affiliation? I saw my colleagues writing APRC, simply because they want to be released. Personally, I refused to write APRC. I just put NA, not applicable. Question 2, which party did you vote for in 2001? All of them, as usual, APRC. I stated NA, with other questions about biography and stuff like that, addresses. Then they call out the list. Yes, all of you can go home. You are supporting APRC. Malick, you are going to stay, since you are not supporting APRC. I stayed back. All of them were released that day, including Lamin Cham and others. I refused to, because I'm a journalist, I should not lie about those things. I was not supporting APRC. I did not vote for APRC. So why should I lie? Because I want to be released.
And who did you remain there with? Were any other people also detained with you?
Yes. That day, all of them left, except Duta Kamaso, Sergeant Buba Jame from State House, and Lamin Bojang from MRC. So we are 4 in number. So we are just left like that.
Do you know if anything happened to your panel of investigators as well after you were detained?
Yes. On July 22nd, 2006, when we already spent 2 months in detention, I think Khalifa Bajinka was the commander of the State House. But during that abortive coup, he was in Nigeria studying. But I think he was mentioned as one of the suspected military officers who took part in that coup. But he was not in town at the time. But his name was featured. Khalifa's brother used to work at the NIA, one of them, called Yaya Bajinka. Yaya was privy to this information. Yaya called his brother that your name has been mentioned. Please don't come after your course. But Khalifa insisted that he will come because he was not part of that. That was just an allegation. He was not part of that the list. The very day he was arriving also, the brother called him, please don't come. Once you are here, they will arrest you. He insisted that he was coming because he did not do anything. At the airport, he was not arrested. He was allowed to arrive. Then we went to his Mile 7 residence. Then at Mile 7 residence, I think this was on the 22nd or 24th of July, the NIA were tasked to go and arrest Khalifa. This was also, the directive came from Musa Jammeh also. That was Nuru Seka, was the most senior officer at the time. Bamba Mane was the officer commanding CTU, but he's late now, of the NIA. Samba Sow, the officer commanding investigation, and his deputy, Assis Hydra. These were the 4 people assigned to go and arrest Khalifa Bajinka at Mile 7. Before they left that evening, his brother called him again, Yaya, that they are about to come at so-and-so time. Please leave. The man insisted that he was not going anywhere. But I don't know what, all of a sudden, before these people arrived at Mile 7, he took a taxi and left for Brikama. When he got to Brikama, we were informed that his uncle, one Bunama, I think he's also a commercial taxi driver, Bunama took him to Casamance. From Casamance, I think he flew out or he stayed there for some time. So he was not arrested, he escaped before these people got to Mile 7. Then Musa said these people connived with Bajinka, the NIA personnel, so let them all be taken to Mile 2. All of them were taken to Mile 2 that night except Assis Hydra. For what reason, we don't know. But we saw Assis the next day, he reported to work. But Nuru Seka, Samba Sow, Bamba Mane, they were all taken to Mile 2 that night for failing to arrest Bajinka. The next morning, they started arresting Bajinka's family. Yaya, the NIA operative, was arrested. We used to work with the security, Civil Aviation Authority Security, Bajinka. Ensa Bajinka also was arrested. Ensa used to work with the Drug Law Enforcement Agency. Bajinka's wife, who was working at the hospital, at the airport at the time, was also arrested. And Bunama, the uncle who took him to Casamance, plus another one Manjang from Yundum, is Bajinka's friend. They were all rounded up and brought to the NIA. And they were all spending the night with us at the reception area, and they were taken one after the other for interrogation.
And how did you learn about all of these things that you've just told us?
We were free at the time, because after 9 days, we were removed from the cell. We spent the rest of the day under the mango tree, just by the parking lot. So you see operatives coming, giving us information, because we used to sit there. So all these things were happening, we were being informed. And when they were arrested, they were brought to the same place we were detained, at the reception area.
And this is Bajinka's family you're referring to?
Yes, Bajinka's family.
Did you receive any information from them as well?
That?
Receive information about what you told us from them?
Yes, because we were all in the same place, we were discussing, they were telling us how they were arrested. Mm-hmm.
And whilst you were detained, do you know if your detention was reported in the media?
It was widely reported, apart from Daily Observer newspaper. That was the only paper that was not writing about our detention. The only time they wrote about us was when they branded us as informants. but they were not writing about us, but the point, the foyer, they were writing about us. And being a journalist, when I was detained, at night, sometimes, I don't want to name this particular security guard, I'll phone Papsen of the Point newspaper, give him information of those that are arrested. At most of the time, if I see anything happening at the NIA, I'll call Papsen. I'll pick my phone from the reception area, call Papsen, return the phone again. The next day it will be published.
And Bajinka's family that was arrested, as you narrated, was this in retaliation to his escape?
Yes, in retaliation to his escape.
So this was just, they were being punished because he had escaped?
I believe so, because they have nothing to do with the case, but they are all rounded up.
Very well. Let's just proceed. And you just mentioned about the papers reporting your detention. Do you have some of the papers with you?
Yes. These are some of the local papers here, but if you also need the printout of the international media houses that publish, like the BBC, the Al Jazeera, and the like, I can also give you printouts of those. But these are the local papers here that we are talking about our case.
Can you please hand them over? Mr. Usher, can you please help us? Mr. Chairman, we have two newspaper articles here which we would like to add to the record. The first is the Point newspaper, dated Thursday, October the 12th, 2006, captioned Malick Mboob, Duta Kamaso released. The second one is the same Point newspaper, also dated Thursday, June 1st, 2006, captioned online newspaper hacked, editor smeared, subscribers threatened. And we have another one. Yes, the date is June 1st, 2006. I think I mentioned. And the third newspaper is also from The Point, and it's Monday, August the 21st, 2006, and it also reports the Freedom newspaper saga. 4 still in detention, and the photographs of Duta Kamaso and Malick Mboob are also printed on it. We would like it to form part of the record as exhibits 0063A, 0063B, and 0063C. Thank you.
Thank you. Request them are granted. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mboob, let's proceed whilst the commissioners are looking at the newspaper articles. Your detention continued. You have already mentioned that you were held in custody for over 4 months, and Duta Kamaso was one of those people that you were held in custody with, and that is why it has been captioned in the newspapers. Can you just tell us what the general conditions of your detention were, and did they change over the course of time?
Yes, after a good number was released, after 9 days or so, so just the 4 of us were left behind, and during those periods, because now it was clear to the NIA that these people they are innocent, so we were just left languishing in detention like that. But during those periods, from time to time, we will ask Sow, that's OC Sow, Samba Sow, that we want to see the DG. Because we can't be left like that. If they believe we've committed a crime, let them charge us and take us to court. But we can't just be left like that. And seeing him now becomes a problem, because we've tried severally, and we don't know what was happening through OC Sow, that we want to see him. Then at some point, after we spent 2 months, one day, Buba Jamed, the soldier, was escorted to Mile 2. For whatever reason, we don't know. They just asked for him, and then he followed the NIA to Mile 2. So he was remanded in Mile 2 for 1 night, then brought back the next day. So when he was brought back, in fact, he was demanding from those operatives that they should take him back to Mile 2. Then I asked him why. Because Mile 2 alone, the name Mile 2, why do you want to go to Mile 2? He said it's better to be imprisoned in Mile 2 or detained in Mile 2 than NIA. I said, well, I asked why. He said, because when I got to mile 2, I was in a room alone with a concrete bed. But look at the cells here. You share with other people. So I prefer to go to mile 2. The condition is better for me there than being detained at mile 2. Just to tell you the horrific condition of the NIA at the time.
Indeed, Mr. Witness. And also, you know, when you mentioned the family of Bajinka also being detained at the NIA, can you tell us whether they were tortured as well?
No, I can't remember. I don't think they were tortured. Yes, they were just detained for some time, then they started releasing them one after the other.
Going back to your conditions of detention, did you have access to your family?
For 1 month in detention, in fact, they don't know where we were because my parents were going in from one police station to the other looking for me. So luckily for me, I don't want to name this security officer at the NIA. We used to live together in Talinding. I told this guy, please inform them that I'm here, and he did so. That's how they came to know about me. So, but then they were told that they should not have access to any visitor. But again, some of them were nice to us. At night, they would allow visitors in. Immediately, it's after 4, 5, 6, when these people have left their management, they would allow visitors. Though they will not allow them to spend much time. They will come spend little time with us at the reception area, then leave. They will bring food for us. But other than that, we are not allowed visitors until the time we left that place.
So these were secret visits, basically.
Secret visits.
It wasn't official.
It wasn't official at all. Secret visits.
What about the food? What was the food like whilst you were being detained there?
At that time, we were informed that what was approved by the NIA management was that each detainee is entitled for $25 per day. And this $25 consists of only lunch and dinner. Lunch is at the Ministry of Justice. After the NIA building, you have the Ministry of Justice. You have food vendors there, where their staff also will go in the lunch, during the daytime to go and buy lunch, breakfast and lunch. So that's where we were catered for. They will just go buy a plate of rice. But for me personally and those people, we refuse to eat those food. Then at night, out of that $25, they will just buy a loaf of tapalapa or senfur. Just that. Open the cell, throw it. We will leave it like that. We will not eat those bread. So we are entitled to $25 per day, but no breakfast. So I could remember bringing in my Standard Chartered checkbook. Then I was banking with Standard Chartered Bank. I almost finished my month savings because I was using from that money to cater for myself, buy breakfast, dinner, and lunch. I will withdraw from the amount, give it to either my relatives to go and cash, then I will leave the cash with the security officers. Anything I want, they will buy for me from any of those restaurants at Independence Drive. So I was using my money to feed myself. The same applies to my colleagues.
So are you saying that during those secret visits, your family would also bring you food to eat?
Yes.
And that's what you were surviving on?
Yes, or sometimes I would just use from my little savings, buy food for myself. In fact, it was like a family because we were all eating together, the 4 of us, just like a family. So we'll buy it together.
And how did you do that, considering that you were detained? How did you buy food for yourself?
No. I was sending the guards on duty at night. So once they withdraw from my account, I will leave the money with them. Then I will ask them whatever I need, then they will go out. But again, it's not for free, because whatever, if you send them out, you have to give them something.
What about access to a lawyer? Did you have access to one?
Yes, after 130-something days, I told my co-detainees that this thing, it's better let's start consulting our families so that they can get us a lawyer, because otherwise we'll just be here like that. Because they will not tell us anything, absolutely nothing. The whole day, we'll just spend the whole day there. They will come to work, they will go back home. You understand? Then one day I told my father, yes, that they need to consult a lawyer. So I think my father also consulted his relatives, so they were able to hire lawyer Edu Gomez. So Edu Gomez took my case to the court, and the same day I was granted I was released by the court. That's the High Court of the Gambia. Released me unconditionally.
And was this lawyer Edward Gomez you are referring to?
Yes, lawyer Edward Gomez, who was one time Minister of Justice in the former government. And
after the High Court ordered your release, what happened to you?
Dr. Kamaso was the first person they called to Captain Sen's office, Captain Abdullah Sen. He was the Director of Internal Security at the NIA. So Captain Dutakamoso was escorted to his office. Then after some time, she returned and said she has just been released. So we were celebrating with her. In fact, she was in tears that she was going, leaving us behind. Few minutes later, I was also called in to the same Captain Sen's office. So when I got there, Captain Sen told me that yes, I've been released, but he did not mention about court order or anything. We are going to release you today, but please, if you leave this place, Malick, don't tell journalists what transpired here. I told him then I will be arrested, because immediately I leave, if they ask me, I'll tell them exactly what happens here. He said, then when you report on bail, we will keep you. I said, no problem. But if I leave this place, whatever they ask me, I will tell them exactly what transpired here.
So you were released on bail, is that correct?
Yes, on bail.
And were you charged with any offenses?
I was not charged at all after spending 139 days in detention at the NIA.
But yet you were released on bail?
Not on bail. The High Court released me unconditionally. Unconditionally. Then, but Captain Sen said they were going to release me on bail, said that I should report to the NIA the next day, which I did. I reported to the NIA the next day. After 2 or 3 visits, I stopped coming. They asked me not to come again.
Very well. And can you tell us, after you were released, what happened? Did anyone contact you?
Yes, because my father, his brother, I think those are the people who came for me. So while we were driving back home, before we got to Denton Bridge, I received a call from BBC, Focus on Africa unit, that they learned that I've just been released. They want to interview me. I said, yes, please give me time. I'm on my way going home. But you can call me around 5, 6, then I'll be in a better position to tell you what exactly happened. Then I also received another call. I don't know who gave them my number that I've been released, or even told them that I've just been released, from the US Embassy. A guy called that they are just trying to confirm that I've been released, which I've acknowledged, from the British Embassy. These things all happened before we got to Denton Bridge.
And it is correct that during your detention, the international community was very interested in your story, and they had actually been writing about you.
Very well. The international community, they've been pressing the government to release all those journalists detained. Mm-hmm.
So what happened when you eventually went home? What did you do?
So the next morning, we had a meeting, myself and Ndetafa and myself. We went to see the High Commissioner, the British High Commissioner, because we were invited for a meeting. So he asked about my ordeal. I've explained everything. In fact, he even told me if I want to apply for an asylum, they will help me. But for reasons best known to me, I said I'm not going anywhere. I am innocent, and they need to tell me why I was arrested. I'm not going anywhere. And I refused to ask for asylum from any country. I stayed here despite the fact that I was out of job. It took me like 8 months or so before I picked up another job. So it was so devastating. And also I didn't even mention the impact it had on RVTH, my dismissal. I could remember before being appointed communications officer of RVTH, a lot of media houses were writing negative effects about RVTH simply because one day we say the hospital is without proper medicine. 2, they were accusing some hospital staff of selling blood and the like, negative publicity. But when I was appointed, within 1 year, 5 months, I was able to improve on the communications and public relations needs of the hospital. 1, a monthly hospital bulletin. 2, a quarterly newsletter. 3, updating that website, that hospital website, because it was a source of information to elective students, to applicants, those who want to work for RVTH. So I was the source of information. That website was their source of information. All hospital activities were being updated regularly. When I was dismissed, that website has never been updated until this year when they set up another website, because nobody was there to do it. The newsletter, the bulletin, the same thing. Even going to the extent, because the attrition rate was very high at the time at the hospital. So many medical staff were leaving for MRC, Bafro, and the like. I initiated a scheme with the help of tourists that comes to the Gambia, whereby tourists visiting the Gambia, they give us cash or kind donation. And those, after returning back to their hospitals, if they want to be friends of RVTH, per month, they will be sending us £10, 15 pounds, and the like. There was this account we opened in the UK. So money was coming in. And what was the purpose of this money? Because we were giving back to medical staff as a form of allowances, just to retain those medical staff, because they were leaving at an alarming rate. We said the only way we can retain them is at least, we cannot compete the likes of MRC and the like, but if you adjust whatever they are having, because the government salary was not much, so let's just adjust whatever we are making from this scheme. I also wrote to Combo Beach Hotel. There was this mobile dental clinic, which I found there. It was not working, dysfunctional. So I wrote to Combo Beach, they gave me $1 million to start up that mobile dental clinic. That would be going round those with dental cases. It was really effective. It was a 1-year contract, and it was going to be renewed. But before it was renewed, I was dismissed from the RV. So I did a lot for that hospital. Even now, if I walked into that hospital, they keep thinking about it. So the impact was not only on me. Look at a hospital like RVT without a proper functioning website until this year, when they are able to have another website. So because the know-how was not there, those who were not there, those who were PRO after me, they were not able to do it.
Thank you, Mr. Witness. We note the impact of your dismissal on RVTH, but we would particularly like to know what the impact was on you, the dismissal, not being without employment. What impact did it have on you in particular?
As the breadwinner of my family up till date, it was so devastating, simply because the culture in this country then was that if you have problem with the former president, or even just with State House, people tend to distance themselves from you. Your friends will not visit you, especially your friends in government. They will all distance themselves from you. Getting another employment, don't even think of government, even some private sector, because if they think that, yes, he had problem with Yaya Jammeh before, who will give you employment? So I was like that until after 8 months without employment, and I was the breadwinner of my family.
So how did you survive?
From the savings, the little savings I made for the previous 5 or 6 years I've been working. That was the only thing I was depending on from my savings.
Yeah, what was the impact on your family as well?
My mom, until the time I was released, my mom would come up to the arch, but she will not be able to come to the NIA. Anytime she gets to the arch, that's where she will stop. You know, motherly love. My parents, they were worried, where is our son? Because if you go to the NIA, he's not here. Wherever we've been visiting so many detention places, centers, and he's not there. It was so devastating. But they've been going around looking for ways of seeking for my release, but unable to do so.
What was the impact of your torture on your health and on your life in general?
Up until today, I'll go for physiotherapy, because I could still feel the impact of the torture. Up until today, I've spent a lot of money on physiotherapy, up until today. So it's so devastating.
And what do you feel?
General body pain all over, up until now.
What about the emotional and psychological effects?
It's there, because in those days, in fact, you don't go closer to the government when you are released, because you don't want them to arrest you. Those are the fear, that hope they will not arrest me again for the second time, because it's embarrassing to the government that I was dismissed, detained, and arrested without anything, any proof. So the trauma was that I may be rearrested at any point of time. But I also refused to leave the country, simply because I was innocent. Even if I was to be arrested, I would just bear it. But leaving the country was not an option.
What was the impact on your professional career? You know, you mentioned that you had to basically, stop full-time journalism. You had to go into other areas, similar areas, but you couldn't practice journalism. What was the effect of that?
Because of the interference then, I totally quit the profession, simply because I was also trying to avoid, and later on got into the same thing. Because for me, my integrity matters. If I'm going to be a journalist, I have to write factual stories. No matter, even if the story is against the president, as long as it's factual, it's reliable and balanced, I don't mind the consequences.
So you had to stop doing something that you loved?
Very well. And I can remember those days, because my first enrollment at the University of the Gambia was in 2002, because we were thinking that journalism will come, because it was well circulated that because when the university was established in 1999, in 2002 we were thinking that the journalism there will be a journalism program. So most of us, we applied thinking that journalism program will come. There was no program until after 15 years before Yaya Jammeh will allow the UTG to start enrolling students to do journalism program. But my first enrollment in 2002 was to study journalism. When there was no journalism, I said, let me opt for development studies, but that was not the case. It took 15 years before the university will accept it through its chancellor, the former president then, to accept journalism program at the university. So we were part of the first cohort. We were enrolled and graduated in 2019. February.
And do you know why this was the case?
Yeah, Jammeh hate journalists, we all know. He called us all sorts of names. Even then, it was just the state media that were allowed, including Observer, and that was not for all cases to cover State House. Sometimes, I mentioned it last week, if I go on my own, they will ask me to go out, that I was not invited, except something that they want publicity, that's the time they will call Observer. So he hated journalists so much.
Have you followed up on your dismissal since you left? You have already said in evidence that your dismissal came from the president's office. Is that correct?
Yes, from the president's office.
Did you make a complaint to anybody?
I dare not. I said, okay, since I got my freedom, let me just move on with my life. But pursuing to know why I was dismissed or trying to get compensation or reinstatement is suicidal. I was not even thinking of such. But I would also urge this commission. I don't know who was the permanent secretary for PMO at the time, but let them be invited and explain why I was dismissed. I'll urge this commission to do that, please.
I'm sure the commissioners will note your urge for them to do that. Thank you very much, Mr. Witness. That's the end of your testimony. I will now hand you over to the commissioners for any questions that they may have, and we will come back to you for any final words that you may have for the Gambian public. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Over to you.
Thank you very much, my counsel, and thank you very much indeed, Mr. Mboob, for your testimony. Sorry we couldn't finish it on Thursday, and then had to bring you back again for a second day, but thank you for your testimony. Commissioners, if you have any questions, please indicate. We'll do that. Yes, Deputy, and make sure you have the floor.
Thank you, Malick.
Thank you.
I have two questions. One is a question of clarification. You mentioned that the head of the IEC was Abu Dande Njai. Did you mean Ndondi Njai? Then the other one is in connection with your employment at the RBTH. Were you employed by the Hospital Management Board or were you employed by the PSC? Because your dismissal letter comes from the PSC. We have not seen your employment letter. So I just need to know who employed you in the first place.
Okay. The first question, I think I made a mistake, is Ndonde Njai. Ndonde Njai. He's late now. Then the second question, my offer letter that was given to me by RVTH was signed by is from the Hospital Management Board. Not from PMO. Hospital Management Board.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Bojang, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Mboob, you said the family of Mr. Bajinka were arrested and detained at the NIA. Did you know what happened to them during their detention and how long they were detained there?
The Bajinka family, they spent close to 2 weeks with us. For Yaya, I think Yaya was dismissed from the NIA. Bajinka's wife, who was working at the airport, I don't know, and the other brothers, but I think Yaya was dismissed from the NIA. Because you have Yaya, who was working at the NIA, Ensa was with the Civil Aviation Authority as a security officer, then the other one, Ensa was with NDA, then Wuye was with the GCA security unit. Whether they were dismissed, I wouldn't know. But they spent some 2 weeks with us before they were finally released.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Jones, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Mboob, regarding your dismissal from the IVTH, I would like to know whether your dues were paid after you were dismissed.
I think the last salary I received at RVTH was the May salary, the month that I was arrested, because if you could recall, I was arrested on the 24th, and this was during salary period. That was the only salary I received from RVTH. When I was released, I was not compensated, I was not reinstated, nothing of sort. In fact, no one calls me. with regards to coming back to that, to take up that appointment.
My second question is in regards to the final question that was asked by Counsel Jahate. You said upon your release, you went to the British High Commission with Data Fast Source and were given the opportunity to seek for asylum if you would wish, but you decided to turn it down because you wanted to unearth the truth. However, following your release, or following sometime after your release, you decided not to follow up on this issue. I would like to know what changed, because it seemed like you had high hopes at the time of your release, but this dampened down eventually with time. So I would like to know what changed. Was it influence from outside, or was it just your personal decision not to follow up on your issue?
I decided that I was not going to follow up simply because I faced the risk of being arrested. Because certainly the presidency would want, because they were already embarrassed that we were arrested and there was no evidence against us. So following up means at the end of the day, I will just be disappeared one night and no one will trace me again. So when I was given that opportunity at the High Commission, British High Commission, though I thank the High Commissioner, but I said I'm not going to do it. Simply because leaving now would mean that all what they allege against me is true, but I'm not going to leave. Let me just stay. This is Gambia for all of us, and I'm ready to stay, but not to leave. Because you could recall most of the journalists, once they are arrested, once they leave, they always leave the country, but I said I'm not going anywhere. I had the opportunity then, but I decided I'm going to stay here. Maybe one day I'll pick up another job and continue with life.
You, Commissioner Jallo, you have the floor.
I have a small question for you, but I want to start with sharing your faith. Most journalists in this country have suffered very tremendously from injustice, unfair play, beatings, inhuman behavior meted against them. What advice do you have for young Gambians who are joining our armed forces?
Armed forces?
To serve, yes, to have the conscience to act only when it is proper and desist from being used by elements who make them torture other people or make injustice to other people who are Gambians like themselves.
You know, it's across the board in all disciplines, including the Gambia Armed Forces or the Army. You have the good elements and the bad ones. The same fate that journalists were going through, it was the same fate some soldiers too went through in the hands of Yahya Jammeh. In fact, many a times you will hear the former president saying that he's going to set an example on those soldiers so that no soldier will do the same thing again. Soldiers or the military, some personnel, they really suffered. Some were accused of crimes that they were innocent of. We've seen that in this country. So the torturers then, who were the junglers, this is just a small group from the State House. Even those at the State House, those soldiers, other soldiers apart from the junglers, they fear them and they are soldiers like them. But because they have excessive powers, because these people are close to the president, they can kill, they can do anything for the president. So people fear them. I heard even if they drive in a barracks and soldiers were chatting, they will just, most of them will keep quiet. They fear them. And these are a group of, just small group, our Gambian brothers for that matter. So they too suffered the same fate. And not all of them are bad. These are just certain group that were doing this crime, heinous crimes for the former president. But the advice is that with this adage, never again, I don't think, not just journalists, but all disciplines, no one will allow such things to happen again in this country. Because now the awareness is there, people can come out publicly to address issues without fear. So I don't think such things will happen again in this country. For me, up till today, if I quit my job, if I should go into the media again, I will do the same thing without fear.
Thank you very much indeed. Bishop, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Malick Mboob, in your narration, you did mention some staff of the MRC who were arrested and detained. Can you tell us the reason why staff from the MRC were arrested?
The night or the day the Freedom newspaper was hacked, they were arresting all subscribers. And the subscribers were not only journalists. Like Wuraba I've mentioned, then Wura was not reporting. Wura was running an internet cafe at Westfield. The same applies to the the MRC staff from MRC Fajara and MRC Farafenye, the likes of Lamin Bojang, Yoruba, Lamin Dabo, and Fakeba Sise. They were all subscribers to Freedom newspaper, and their names were published and branded as informants. That's why they were rounded up, together with those Gamtel staff as well, and Buba Jame, who is from the military.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mboob, if you have any closing remarks to make, you may proceed to do so now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to all the commissioners for giving me this opportunity to share with the general public. I would like to talk on three major issues. That's one, the need to have strong institutions in this country. Two, this eye service in the civil service. Three, the plight of journalists in this country. One, I believe if the Mile 2 prison, Central Prison, was a strong institution, they would not allow Musa Jame or Tumbul Tamba or anyone to lead soldiers to remove detainees from the cells, because I believe it's only the High Court who can send detainees to Mile 2. But Musa Jame and his gang were doing this. Anytime they come, they will open the cells for them. I believe maybe some of them, they were not happy, but they cannot do anything at the time, because if you do so, you will meet the same fate like others. The NIA, again, because prior to this TRRC, many people believed that it was the NIA torturing. Well, it was not. I'm not saying they are not torturing, because I've witnessed 2 tortures in the NIA, done by the NIA personnel themselves. Of this Sunday and another Nigerian, I witnessed that. Plus that Ibrahim Kanyi, the youngest detainee in our case. They were tortured by NIA operatives. But over 90% were done by the junglers. If the NIA was a strong institution like the FIB, the CIA, they would say no to it. You can bring people from Mile 2 and use our premises as a torture center. So I think with this new Gambia, whoever is there as the DG, be it immigration, NIA or Mile 2, they should not accept such. Never should they allow people to be detainees to be taken from Mile 2 or to be punished at the NIA center. It's wrong. 2, this has to do with the heads of our parastatals and government, even the ministers. Then, if you have problem with government, if we receive directives from government, please treat the suspect, the person as a suspect. But once it's a directive and a presidential directive, you are treated as guilty. Whilst you are not. Even before investigation, the way they will treat you is wrong. And this goes to the police then. If we receive directives from OP, it's just like any other complainant. Let them treat it with caution. But sometimes they will presume that, yes, it has to do with the president, extra care must be taken. At all costs, we have to bring evidence. It's bad to fabricate evidences. So many people are languishing in jail because, just like my case, if I should concur with Musa Jame to change my statement, the whole world will know, yes, Malick confessed to the crime, when I was not, when I was forced to do so. So if a suspect is brought, please let them treat the person with care until they were able to get substantive evidence. But because the directives come from OP, we have to use all necessary means to make sure that you are guilty. Finally, I'm not saying journalists were hard hit. We are the only discipline that were hard hit in the former regime. But to be honest, we really suffered. In those days, you don't even think of getting a scholarship, government scholarship, to read at the University of the Gambia if you apply as a journalist. Please, the new government, I'm appealing. So many students are out there at the School of Journalism, because then parents were not allowing their kids to join the profession. It's just very few of us. But now you see the number is coming up simply because, yes, we believe there will be no torture again. There will be no arresting of journalists. Yes, you can arrest journalists if they do wrong, but you just not arbitrary arrest like that. Let them give scholarship to journalists. So many people are out there without scholarship, and they are going through that university program. Because they were accusing them that journalists, they are not trained journalists, they are just join the list. But now they are ready to be trained, and the university is there. The GPU School of Journalism is there. Stratford College is there. Let them give journalists scholarship, especially at the university level. We suffered a lot, and it's high time that we are also considered, just like medical students and those in the law profession. We need to be considered. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Mboob. The Commission will no doubt take note of your suggestions and advice, and we thank you very much indeed for your testimony. If there are no questions, we would take a 30-minute break and come back in 30 minutes. Thank you so much. Meeting is adjourned.